500 high-profile political dignitaries, a record number, are gathering in Germany for the 55th Munich Security Conference. They are there to look for solutions and hopefully find breakthroughs for a series of global and regional issues. What are the most pressing concerns topping the agenda this year? Why has this conference become increasingly important over the years? And what results might we expect from the ongoing meetings? To take a closer look at the Munich Security Conference 2019, I'm happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department for European Studies, and Hafiz Zordin, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. We shall also speak via satellite to Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU Asia Center in Brussels. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to our discussion here, gentlemen. Earlier this week, the Munich Security Report 2019 was released to somehow coincide with the opening of this year's Munich Security Conference. The title is very interesting. It's like great puzzle. Who will pick up the pieces? Now, what are your interpretations about the message that the title delivers?
Well, I think they could have done something else, but they were too kind. I think they probably should have renamed the conference to Munich Insecurity Conference, because the world is changing before our eyes. We don't know where it's going, but many of the givens in the past decades are now up for grabs with a change from a liberal globalist order to an illiberal order in some respects. And we don't know where that's going, but we know that we have to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So this conference comes at a very critical time. So it's like the decks of a card, they're being reshuffled, but we don't know where the cards are going to come out. It's a very important conference. The timing is critical, and the world is in a state of flux.
Without exception, so both the World Economic Meeting in Davos as well as Munich Security Conference would always make headlines. So what's your take about why people feel constantly that they are enveloped in an atmosphere of insecurity despite the end of the Cold War of 20 years ago?
I think we can find out a very important phenomenon from this increasingly influence for this MSA in recent years. I think the one reason is mostly or generally people feel not so safe like before. I think one reason is indeed we do have so many regional conflicts and also some even competitions between players in international arena. Of course, I think another very important reason for this unsafe feeling is now some players, some countries is trying to take use of security as an instrument to interfere with some, some normal affairs in international relations. So I think that gives more and more worries from not only from MSA and also from the international community. We can find out a very strong worry from this report you mentioned before that now it looks like more and more big power competitions, and then there will be some change or some effects from this competition in regional, in some bilateral, security issue like that. So I think now the problem is, now the security could not be, departed from the economic and trade issue, because if we look at the whole background of the deglobalization trend, I think yes, the unsafety will be a part of the deglobalization at this moment.
And I'd like to add something too. In the past, these conferences have primarily focused on military security, but as you said, we are moving away from that. And another element that has to be considered is the global environmental picture, because it's a very serious problem that is connected to the other elements of security. And I believe that this conference, not only this time, but in the future, will more and more have to address the environmental issues.
We have many concerns or issues on the agenda, but don't you think this world is in strong need of leadership? what does that mean for this world of increasing uncertainty, Hong Jian?
Yes, I think now the big question for not only for security, and also just like you mentioned, a very big question is the lack of leadership in the world. I think, of course, we pay a lot of attention on the withdrawal of the United States from some multilateral system, and including some bilateral treaty, like what happened recently. I mean, this intermediate range missile treaty with Russia, like that. So it gives a very big question for players, for the peoples in the world is, yes, perhaps the world has been used for this, we call the leadership, under the leadership of the United States. But once the United States try to get less responsibility, how could we, the world international community do? And also, of course, the side of another side of the question is not yet for Western world. They could not, or they are reluctant to receive some new, or emerging powers as a part of the leadership. For example, how about the position of China? How could Europe, United States deal with the issue with Russia, with some other emerging powers? So we can find that yes, the leadership issue is so important. But now the question is still for some, especially Western countries, they try to keep the traditional mindset to deal with it. I think that's the core of the big question.
Yes, indeed, with the ongoing diametrically opposed trends such as deglobalization. Let me cross over to Fraser Cameron, who's standing by in Brussels. Let's hear a voice from Europe as to why we live in an increasingly puzzled world, and who's going to pick up all the pieces. What's your take, Fraser?
Well, there's no magic solution. You won't find it at one single conference in Munich or Davos or anywhere else. It's a question of structural change in the world, shifting economic forces that bring about also political changes. This is a long-term effect where power is moving from the west to the east and to the south too, reflecting demographic and economic changes. So there's not going to be any single form of leadership on any issue. There will be coalitions that come together for particular issues. On trade, it will be the US, China, and Europe, for example. On the military issues like the INF, it will obviously be the nuclear powers that have to deal with these issues. So you will get coalitions coming ad hoc together to deal with particular problems that arise. I think it's going to be a messy situation, but there's not going to be any single source of power in the world in the foreseeable future.
Well said. Let's take a holistic view about what's going to happen in the world. For example, President Trump goes as far as to talk about perhaps the end of WTO or how to seriously overhaul the United Nations. So these things raise concern about the Yalta Conference that came into being with the end of the Second World War, as well as, for example, the Bretton Woods system. Is the US dollar still as strong as it has been? Now, what are your thoughts about these major concerns? Because we have to get a broad picture before addressing specific concerns on the agenda.
The world has to come up with a new way of looking at problem solving. So it's probably a good time for this Munich conference, because it needs to start to address these issues and address on an institution by institution basis what needs to be done to bring those multilateral institutions into the 21st century. Let's face it, America is withdrawing, with naming people like David Malpass to be the president of the World Bank, a person who's against it, is not a good sign. We need to find a way to change the way that the president of the World Bank is elected. It's only by tradition that the Americans nominate the president of the World Bank. It's not by law or treaty. We need to look at all these institutions, whether it's the World Bank, IMF, WTO, whatever. These institutions were created in the ashes of World War II, when nations like China and India were not as important as they are today. So I think because we're on the cusp of perhaps a new paradigm, we need to start seriously exploring the rules of the game that changes the leadership. And if that's like building ad hoc coalitions or changing the rules to give more room to countries that should be involved, that needs to be decided. But the rules do not work in the 21st century that were set in the 20th.
Well, Munich Security Conference takes place each year without exceptions in the backyard of continental Europe, but with the apparent and remarkable, if not embarrassing, absence of a high-profile Chinese delegation. And China, by the way, has become the second biggest economy and the biggest trading power, and yet our voting share in both the IMF and the World Bank accounts for a fraction of the total. So what's going to be the solution like?
Yes, I think China takes the importance of this, not only the MSA and some other platform to, practice its ideas, some solutions to help this global governance indeed. If we look at this MSA as a platform to find some solutions for global security governance, yes, this time Mr. Yang and the Chinese delegation, I think will try to also contribute some ideas for this conference. I think that now for China, firstly, very, very important principle for Chinese policy, for Chinese behaviors in the world affairs is to insist this so-called multilateral cooperation. I think it's also on the same line with the most of the European countries. For example, this time Chancellor Merkel will try to address the importance of to keep up this multilateralism indeed. And of course, secondly, I think China also try to find out more synergies, some more connectivities between its own experience, its own solutions, and the solutions, the ideas from other players. I think it's very, very important. For example, how about the BRI initiative? I think it's a very big effort from China to try to find out the connectivity or synergies between Chinese solutions and the solutions from other partners and players. But of course, the third thing is how could China to practice its policy? Because so far we do have so many, commitments, including several years President Xi's speech on Davos Forum, and indeed, in recent 2 years, we find out maybe we try to narrow down the gap, indeed, between our proposals and our behaviors and policies. I think it will take some more time, and of course, it will get some more, successful, result once China and some other partners we can get a closer cooperation.
Let me go back to Fraser. Regarding the issue of globalization or the growing sense of connectivity, which is of course the centerpiece of BRI. Now let's look at the agenda of Secretary Pompeo, who recently toured much of Central and Eastern European countries, calling for decoupling Huawei. Huawei, of course, assumes leadership somehow in the area of 5G. Do you think it's an easy job for the Americans to persuade their European partners and allies in an attempt to seriously de-link the Chinese economy and, of course, high-tech market? What do you think?
No, it's certainly not easy, although this is a top priority for the U.S. administration. They have been lobbying, not just in Europe, but in many other parts of the world against using Huawei technology. It's a bit of a dilemma for Europeans because Huawei is certainly ahead in many areas of that technology. I think they've got about 25% of the patents on the 5G technology. So you either have to wait for European companies like Ericsson or Nokia to catch up, which means sort of losing out in the early stages of the 5G race, or you have to introduce perhaps some kind of controls, as the British have done, for example, on Huawei technology. So I think Europeans will not simply fall into the American camp. They will try and adopt a middle ground, trying to see where they can reach compromise by using Huawei, because it is a very advanced technology. And also, they don't really want to be seen as purely siding with the United States in terms of the other trade disputes they have with China. They want to keep that as a bilateral issue.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with Harvey Zordin, Cui Hongjian, and Fraser Cameron. We are discussing whether we'll find solutions or the world will continue to be obsessed with the issue of deglobalization. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go back to the issue of having a possible no-deal Brexit. What's going to happen in Europe? Do you think the European Union is going to fall apart?
I don't think it'll fall apart, and if it does, it won't be right away. But I do think that Brexit, especially a no-deal Brexit, is a very serious matter especially for Europe and for the world, because it does call into question the unity of the European Union and what it's going to do post-Brexit, how it's going to reorganize with an important military and economic power. And this is still in a state of flux, but again, I think we have to hope for the best, but more unfortunately probably have to prepare for the worst.
Let me go back very quickly to Fraser. Do you think British troops are likely to be mobilized to help maintain law and order once no-deal Brexit occurs?
No, I mean, I think a no-deal scenario is very unlikely because everybody knows the consequences would be pretty catastrophic. Both the EU and Britain are important players and know that they have to reach a deal, but traditionally in these kind of negotiations it really does go down to the wire. So I don't think we will actually get agreement till the European Council, the summit, on the 21st of March, and that's when people will emerge after an all-night sitting. We have a deal, white smoke will arise, and Brexit will have an agreed departure. It will still be a lose-lose situation, but it will be a managed withdrawal. It will not be a cliff edge.
With respect, I think that it is a serious situation, and the 11th hour may not do it for this negotiation, because I think the EU bears a very heavy responsibility. If they cave in to the UK, then every other country in the EU that wants a change is going to be knocking on Brussels' door. And so I think if the EU has any negotiating wiggle room, it's not very much. So I'm not hopeful at all.
Hongjian, with the end or elimination of INF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty, which was a hallmark of the end of the Cold War. Now, Foreign Minister of Russia, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, showed up at the Munich Security Conference. Do you think a new Cold War is very much like a repeat of the haunting specter we saw in the Cold War?
Now we are indeed at a very, very critical time to maybe decide which way we should go. Go back to the Cold War, maybe a new Cold War, or get out from this trap. I think on one side we do have some more confidence with that we are wise. I mean, as a human being, we are wise enough to get back to not get into this Cold War trap, because it happened. It's not a good thing for every country, for every player, because also at this moment we do have a very, very high interdependent situation in economy, trade, investment. But on the other side, we have to have some more suspicions with this wisdom of human beings, especially for some countries, to say that now, for example, some countries try to take use of the security issue, as I mentioned before, is as an instrument to limit the competition from other countries and try to squeeze some countries from markets like that. So once this happens, which means that security issue will become a very, very dominating issue for regions, for countries. Once it happened, there will be some more, rumors or some fake news about these competitions or even confrontations. Once it happens, I think it will be very, dark side for this trend is people, for example, people and the countries, they will get less and less mutual trust, and then there will be more and more, risk for make how to say, misunderstanding, and then make some mistake. So I think once this trend going in that way, I would like to say we could not be so optimistic about the scenario of the new Cold War.
Fraser, what we are discussing here in the Beijing studio actually addresses the seamy side of the same coin. What about the other side, which hopefully would be a better one? Now, what does the United States mean when it unilaterally declared the end of the so-called INF after President Trump decided to terminate the nuclear deal with Iran?
Well, firstly, there's a 6 months time frame. It's not happening immediately, and one hopes that during that period there would be sufficient flexibility on both sides to actually see the benefits of maintaining the treaty, because the consequences for Russia are pretty grim. I mean, the collapse of the Soviet Union was largely due to an arms race sparked by Ronald Reagan, and Trump has threatened to do the same again, which I'm sure is something Russia does not want to see. So I think it's in Russia's interest to maintain this treaty, and it's the interest of other nuclear powers and indeed the rest of the world to do so as well. It's Trump playing hardball, and Trump is doing some things that no previous American presidents have done, but he's also playing, I think, to the instincts of the many Americans in, for example, trying to pull American troops out of Afghanistan and Syria. He's broad popular support for that, taking a strong America first position. There isn't a great deal of depth for multilateralism in the States, and I think it's important for people to remember that. You have to really remind Americans why it is actually in their interest to strengthen multilateral institutions, including the INF Treaty.
Equally important, apparent, and hopeful news is the positive results of a peace talk between the Taliban and the United States regarding the withdrawal of American troops from the war-torn country of Afghanistan. Having said this, let's look at the absence of French President Emmanuel Macron, who is busy engaging local leaders in town hall meetings one after another, trying to repair his political roadmap following the massive and disturbing Yellow Vest movements and protests in the streets of France. It's not only spending on defense which has caused divergence, Fraser, among NATO members. The pipelines between Germany and Russia also evoked strong opposing views from the US and France, who believe it will give Russia more leverage to influence Europe. Some even suggest, Fraser, that this could be a reason for Macron cancelling his plans to attend the conference in Munich. What's your take?
I think it's mainly domestic reasons. I mean, I think everyone has an interest in a strong, reformed French economy, so putting the priority on domestic issues at the moment for Macron is quite right. I think in terms of Nord Stream, it's too late. I mean, the first Nord Stream was built 10 years ago, so the second Nord Stream pipeline is going to add some capacity. But frankly, I think there's a lot of commercial interests involved on the United States side, on Poland's side, on Ukraine's side. The reality is that even at the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union delivered oil and gas to NATO countries. And the bottom line is that Russia now needs the money from oil and gas. It's a cheap, reliable source of energy from Russia to Europe, and it also keeps the interdependence lines open. So I think, it's a manufactured crisis in many ways, Nord Stream. I think it's good that we continue to have some economic links with Russia at the present time.
And the title of a recent edition of Economist, a prestigious journal, says we face globalization of the world economy. Well, that's sensitive enough to create a new concept. Having said this, what's going to happen in East Asia, Harvey? Events are not always only about the Korean Peninsula. Recently, Russia and Japan seem to be going after a new peace treaty based on the Japan-Soviet Joint Declaration. What is this treaty about?
the treaty is about a number of things: better relations, better bilateral relations, better regional relations, cooperation in terms of exploration of resources and so on. But the problem is that the negotiation between Japan and Russia a few weeks ago was unsuccessful over this island dispute. And so well, that is still in the picture. A treaty and more cooperation is more in the background. So today I'm not hopeful about a lot of the things that we've talked about. So I'm not hopeful about that treaty either. But one of the great benefits of a conference like the one in Munich is the fact that a lot of people are meeting on the sidelines. And so during or between important speeches, people have a chance to get together, like, for instance, the Secretary General of NATO meeting with the Foreign Secretary Lavrov of Russia. And so there's an opportunity to try to settle some of these problems and have a discussion informally. So I'm hopeful on that level that a lot of forward-looking discussions will be held with some results. And maybe with regard to this treaty, there might be some movement as well.
Toward the end of this very interesting brainstorming session on dialogue, Hong Jian, what do you think of the impact should President Trump really postpone the March the 1st deadline for the negotiations between the two sides, the United States and China, on the trade war? Will that usher in a new era in the Indo-Pacific Ocean?
I think this postpone for this negotiation between two countries, I think it will give some message for us. Is maybe for United States, it's try to maybe play the game not only with China and also with EU, just like Fraser mentioned it, because as we know now, the United States also try to press European Union side to have some more discussion with the United States in this so-called free trade agreement like that. And of course, at the same time, I think that how could the United States, especially President Trump, to take consideration about how it's internal politics, because now, as we know, the Congress and the government, there's some more and more competition. So I think all of these give some reason for this postpone. But finally, I think that not only which date we will decide to have this negotiation, China and the United States, I think so far we are sensitive enough to find out a solution for this trade issue, because I think once China and the United States, we are responsible, we are big countries with a very clear sense of our own responsibilities. We should take some more, resources. We should pay more attention on this issue, because of course, once this trade issue could not get some good solution, it will give some, it will have some, byproducts to some other issue, including the security issue.
Ironically, noteworthy is the opening of the Munich Security Conference happens to coincide with the temporary lift of the federal government shutdown in the United States. Perhaps we see some kind of a mixed message about the silver lining in the darkest clouds. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.